Welcome to the Gen Z Show. I'm your host, James McLamb, joined again this week with my daughter, Sarah Beth, who was actually able today to join me for the entire interview. So, how are you doing today, Sarah?
I'm doing really well. It's beautiful today. It's 70 degrees and sunny, so I'm happy.
Well, there you go. Hey, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about we interviewed Brian Highfield, who identifies himself as the happiest person he knows. He describes his journey from being a depressed youth with very limited hope and dreams to someone now who is the happiest person he knows. And the bearded philosopher, as he's branded himself, really dumps some major truth bombs on us today. So, Sarah, what was some of the things that Brian shared with us on his journey to understanding how people can become fulfilled in life? Not just happy, but fulfilled.
Well, I definitely say that was a really great point that he was making is that happiness is a feeling and it comes and goes, but fulfillment
Mm-hmm.
is that foundation. So I really loved his points on that. He shared 5 laws to help us feel more fulfilled in life, which was awesome. And then just hearing more about his life experiences and the things that he goes through and some of his stories, it was awesome. Like the whole interview was great. Just hearing him talking about happiness and how we can get there.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Brian's comment, the 5 laws as well. That he talks about the 5 laws of fulfillment that he described. Very practical, very easy to understand, and look for the app and to examine those laws and look for the application. Look down in the show notes or listen if you're listening. Look at the show notes because there are some links to his website and to the book that actually describes this a little bit more. His book called Bazooka Proof. And so you're really going to enjoy this conversation with the bearded philosopher, author, and entrepreneur, Mr. Brian Highfield. Brian, thank you for joining us today on the Gen Z Show. Before we even get started, let's do a shout out to our mutual friend, Dave Kaufman, who introduced us. So thank you, Dave, for that. But thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, Brian, our audience wants to know a little bit more about you from you. They've heard Sarah Beth and I talk about you, but they want to hear about you from you. So if you don't mind, just introduce yourself to our Gen Z audience.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Brian Highfield. I'm coming to you from Sarasota, Florida. I lived in Ohio for 25 years, actually Cleveland, Ohio. And my wife and I decided to no longer participate in winter. And that's why we moved to the sunny state of Florida. But it's been a long journey to get here. I grew up in southern part of Ohio, very rural country. In a very small town. It had more than one stoplight. Some people say, well, was it a one stoplight town? No, it had two. But it's a small town just in the country. And just had a childhood there with a lot of different experiences. My dad dabbled in a lot of different things. He was a truck driver. He was a farmer. He was a real estate agent, just trying to piece together any money he could to support a family of 5 kids. I was the youngest of those 5 kids. And my brothers and sisters let me know that I was the spoiled one, but I don't think that was the case, really. And then, just growing up, we were poor, but didn't really know how poor we were. And in fact, today's standards, probably lower middle class. We weren't destitute. We weren't impoverished or anything, but we were on the lower end of the spectrum. And so that presented its own challenges, growing up in a family of 7 people in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. I mean, that's kind of where we grew up. And it was, I wouldn't trade that childhood for anything, because there were so many good lessons learned growing up in that type of environment and having to be resourceful and doing that. And I was often depressed at times because we didn't have a whole lot. And I saw people that did, and envy got the better of me here and there. But I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do, and I couldn't have the things I wanted to have. And I really wanted the most out of life, but I got addicted to being depressed, and you can get addicted to being depressed sometimes. You enjoy being depressed, and that scared me actually when I realized that I was actually looking to be depressed to feel better. That sounds wacky, I know, but that's where I was as a kid. But I made a decision along the way that I wasn't going to stay in that situation. I wasn't going to let that happen. And I started really dreaming big. And I had people, including my own parents, sometimes that would try to steal those dreams. Sometimes, they were kind of looking out for my best interest. I don't blame them for that. They were trying to bring me down to reality, but I didn't want to stay in reality. I wanted to create a new reality for myself. I wanted to go to the most expensive school in the state. And my parents were trying to talk me into going to community college instead, because it was something that they thought was more realistic. But where there's a will, there's a way. I found a way to get admitted to that school and to somehow pay for that school. And with a combination of a lot of student loans and some loan from my grandfather, I was able to accomplish that. And I studied engineering, became an engineer. I worked for one of the largest communications firms in the country for several years, but I always had an entrepreneurial spirit, and I started 2 successful businesses that are still thriving today. And so that has allowed me to realize my dreams and to actually have the things that I've always wanted to have, and be the person I wanted to be, and do the things I wanted to do with the people that I love and care about. Life's short, so where there's a will, there's a way. Let's go make it happen, and go out there and get out of life what you want out of it. And that's what I was trying to do, and I put a lot of those thoughts into my book, Bazooka Proof, which really talks a lot about that.
Well, you mentioned, in your bio on your website, which we'll share in a moment, it talks about you being that depressed youth, a feeling of hopelessness and really feeling like a limited dreams, and then it transforming you into the happiest person that you know. You hit on some of that as you were talking about it, and one of the things that you mentioned, it talked about hopelessness to dreaming big. So could you tell us in that transformation journey a little bit of how that happened there? And then I want to come back, or maybe you were talking about during this, is was there a connection between being hopelessness and moving out of that and being free to dream?
Yeah, and so that transition, it came to a lot of thinking. I had a lot of time on my hands, so a lot of thought, and so I started to really ponder a little bit about life in general, but more specifically the power we have over our own lives, which we don't realize. Most of us feel hopeless. We feel powerless. We don't have the control that we want in our lives. And I would say in a lot of ways, we really do, because you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to things. And that was one of the things that I began to realize is I had, and we all have, tremendous power on the thoughts that enter our head. We do have control over that. And one of my main principles that I think if you understand this principle, the rest becomes a little bit easier. But the principle is about it's about understanding that you are the only person who can decide how you feel at any moment in time. No one else has the power over you to put thoughts into your head unless you let them. So quit letting people put negative thoughts and those thoughts of hopelessness in your head, and start listening to your own thoughts, and realize it. It's a great power once you realize it. And people often say, well, yeah, I kind of know that already. I kind of know, but they may know, but they don't practice it a lot. And it is something you have to practice. And that was an important part of the transition, is as things would happen to me, I would be faced with a decision of, okay, do I want to feel sad and depressed about this? Or do I want to try to find a silver lining? Or how can I turn this into a positive thought or a positive experience? And we all look at things differently. And so you can be next to someone who experiences the exact same thing as you and have two very different reactions to it. One example comes to mind. I went to a restaurant with my family, and it was a busy restaurant. So I set my expectation. We're going to have to wait a while for a table. We're going to have to wait a while. And we did. We waited 45 minutes before we were sat down. And then we sat down. They brought our food out quickly, but we didn't get our appetizers. And my family was furious. They chose to be angry over this. And when we alerted the waiter that we didn't get our appetizer, he brought it right away and he said, "I'm taking it off the bill." And I was elated. I was excited about that, but my family was still furious about this, and it bothered them the whole night with that. And that experience, one of many, struck me like, how can we both experience the same thing, but you're walking away angry and upset over the experience, and I experienced joy and I was elated that it happened. And that was just an example of the choices that we have in our own lives on how we react to things that are outside of our control.
That speaks really deep, and it's very much a Ziegler philosophy too, that you control. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control your actions to this. I want to, yeah, go ahead, sir.
I was just gonna say, yeah. And when you were introducing yourself and what you've done, and the experiences you've went through, you talked about as a youth, you were almost choosing to be depressed. And I mean, I've seen that, like you said, you and your family experienced the same thing and had two totally different outcomes in how you felt. I felt that too. Sometimes I feel like I choose to be sad over something or upset over something when in reality, it's not that big a deal, but it almost makes me feel better and feel sorry for myself. Like that weird balance that you were talking about. Do you mind expanding on that process and how you think that affects people?
Well, yeah, and we sometimes make excuses for ourselves. We tell ourselves it's okay to feel that way, and it is to feel okay that way, but it's not okay to stay in that place for very long. So when we experience those types of emotions, you can get addicted to them. And so if you're always looking for the negative things, you're going to be addicted to that. And so any experience you have, you start figuring out what's wrong. And then if you find something that's wrong, all of a sudden the thought enters your head, well, I need to be mad about this. I should be infuriated. And I'm just going to sit here and wallow in my misery because this happened over here. Now, the opposite, if we're looking for something good, we're going to find it. And there's a rule out there that says whether you're looking for something good or something bad, you're going to find whatever you're looking for. And so I always chose to look for the good in things rather than trying to pick apart, because I knew that if you are looking for the bad things, you're going to find them, and then you're going to choose to feel bad about them. And so why not? If we have a choice, I'd rather feel good about it than bad about it.
Yeah.
How do we as parents? I'm sorry, just Sarah, you want to say something?
One more follow-up question. I have to ask it right now. Do you think that's linked to people, their self-image, how they view themselves? If they're looking for bad, do you think it's because of how they feel about themselves?
Yeah, I think it's both inward and outward projection. And I used to, and I looked at people, I would try to find something wrong with them because I wanted to make myself feel better. And we often do that. If we can find something wrong with them, then I feel a little bit better about myself. And that's the wrong way, because we can celebrate everybody, and everybody's got their own unique look and everything that they offer and their own mind. And so I think we have to have a positive self-image. And I think there's good in everybody. We're going to find something. Maybe you don't look like the Barbie doll, or you look like the Ken doll. And often we put a lot on how we look in the mirror to feel good about ourselves. And we often discount all the other good qualities that we offer. And so I realized, as a kid, I was doing that too. And I became very judgmental. And that's something I'm kind of anti that now. I'm really when I look at someone, I'm trying to find the best out of them. And I used to, if someone tripped and fell on the street, I used to be the person to laugh at them. Look at that guy. But really, it's like, gosh, that's sad that guy had that experience and fell, and you feel bad for him. And so it was really, I began to look at people differently to try to find those positive things. But you're right. I think when we do that, we start to feel better about ourselves too, because we're a better person for that. We're less judgmental. We're less, I don't know what to call it. We just less superficial, really, and looking for those good qualities in everybody.
I think it's important for us to tackle this subject of hopelessness. I don't know if you two have seen this, but the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention just last Thursday released a survey on youth today that they conducted in 2021. And one of the findings is that 4 in 10 teens are reporting that they feel persistently sad or hopeless. That's the words that they are using, persistently sad or hopeless. 40% of all teens, according to this survey, are feeling that way. So how, as a parent or as someone who is working with youth, how can we help youth? Because there's a lot of self-awareness that you talk about. You had the self-awareness when you were sitting there thinking about it to say, I need to get out of this state.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking 4 in 10, 40%, they're not reaching that level of self-awareness. How do we help them do that? What are some practical ways? Because I'm sitting here thinking there's somebody watching this and they're going, you're describing my child. You're describing this youth I'm working with. What can I do today to start them on that journey?
Yeah, and I think, and communication is key, I think, in any relationship, but especially between parents and their kids. And I say that because to really, when something happens in the news, first of all, you probably need to turn off the news, because the news is nothing but negative out there. And to the youth, it could really instill, like, man, it is a horrible world out there. There's all these bad things happen, these bad people doing bad things, and that's all we see on the TV a lot. But if they do see that, that's where the communication is important, to have that conversation about what's really happening and why it's happening, so they better understand it, rather than just feeling a sense of helplessness or hopelessness that this is happening in their world. And this is the world they're growing up in, and that they're going to venture off into with that. So I don't want to say overprotect them and not show them the news, but be able to have a conversation of what's really happening there, and try to find those silver linings of what's good that can come out of that situation, and have those types of conversations as well. So I've got a 5-year-old son, and we're having those conversations because we'll be, he'll see what's going on with the war in Ukraine, and he's like, Daddy, what's going on? Why are they doing that? And to be able to explain it, to understand, like, yeah, there's those situations exist, but the good that are in people at the same time. So we talk about the refugees and what people are doing to help the refugees that are in that situation, and the world leaders of what they're trying to do to make things right. And so to give them a sense that, this isn't just a war that's just bad. There's some good things happening at the same time. It's a terrible situation. It's tragic, but to look for the good in people, what good people are doing in spite of this tragic situation that's going on in Ukraine.
What do you think caused you for that switch to flip on in you that said, hey, I'm in this bad spot, I need to get out of that? Because I was thinking when you were talking about that, the very first thought that came to my mind was, that was obviously pre-social media, because most youth are feeling some kind of depression. Sarah Beth, would you agree to this? They're feeling some kind of depression. They tend to gravitate towards their devices to get that hit of they
that
use
dopamine hit, from social media, for
hit.
Sure.
Instead, our generations we didn't have that, so we had a little bit more reflection time. So what was the switch, do you think, in you?
It was, I think I got sick of liking being depressed, if that makes any sense. It was, I came to the realization that I was choosing to be depressed on purpose to make myself feel better, to give myself an excuse. And I kind of said, this is just a bad path to be on. where does this end? It can't end anywhere good. And that was the realization I had. So I really started to think differently. I really started to change my mindset a little bit, and worked on things to become more resilient, to have that mental toughness when bad things happen, that I can just shrug them off.
Mm. I like that. I like that a lot. So you mentioned earlier that a lot of these principles and these stories and stuff you put in your book. Tell us a little bit about your book, so that if folks can see it, they can use it as a resource to start them on their journey.
For sure. Yeah. So I named the book Bazooka Proof because it's not, I think people can be better than bulletproof. And that's why I called it Bazooka Proof. And it's really talking about having that resilient mindset. Resilience, though, is, hey, if you get knocked down, you can get back up. But I put some principles in the book. It's like, don't get knocked down in the first place. Because again, if you get knocked down, sometimes you're giving power to people to knock you down. And so I really thought long and hard about it, and I really boiled it down to 5 principles in the book. And I call them the 5 laws of fulfillment. And I thought fulfillment was the appropriate word rather than happiness. Happiness is emotion. Emotions go up or down. You know, it's really kind of always in flux on how we feel at any one moment. Whereas fulfillment, I felt like, was a foundation. That was, if I have fulfillment, that's something that's really hard to move. You kind of have that baseline that people really can't steal from you. And so I talk about the 5 laws of fulfillment on how to build that baseline up. So think of it as, if you had $1 million in the bank, it doesn't matter, if someone steals $10 from you, so the $10 is my happiness at the moment. I'd be kind of unhappy if someone stole $10 from me. But if I have a big bank account, I really don't care, and I'm not going to let it bother me very long. And that's kind of an analogy to what I'm talking about. So fulfillment is like your big bank account, whereas happiness is just kind of what happens on a day-to-day basis. But the more solid the foundation you have, the higher your happiness level is going to be. It's going to take a lot for you to get below that threshold of what your fulfillment is. And so the 5 laws, real quickly, the first law I've already talked about, and that's it's really, I call the law of self actualization, which is all about you and only you have the power to decide how you feel at any moment in time. It's a constant. It's true. It's just most people don't believe it, or they don't practice it enough. There's also the law of appreciation. Appreciation plays such a huge role in our emotional well-being and our mental toughness. So when we learn to appreciate what we have, when something doesn't go our way, we're like, it's okay. I still have this. I still have a family that loves me. I still have this going on in my life that's good. And so if we recognize those things that are going right, when something doesn't go right, it doesn't bother us as much. We don't stress out about it. We don't enter that state of hopelessness and helplessness. So we need to learn to appreciate what we have more, what we have going for us. And there's a whole talk that I do on this, because a lot of people are like, well, they may be in a situation where they don't feel like they have a lot to appreciate. And I'm not going to go through my whole talk. We don't have time today. But one of the first principles I say in my talk is, you're alive. You're alive right now. 150,000 people died today. And I'm sure a vast majority of them would give anything to stay another day on this earth. So you're alive right now. And so, you have that to appreciate, and kind of build from there, right? You're alive, you have health, you have youth. We were talking to a lot of people, your audience is youth, or people who work in youth. Do you know how many billionaires would give their fortune to trade their age with someone else? I mean, unfortunately, we can't do that, right? But hey, I just turned 50. I'd give everything I own to be 25 again. And so for people that
if I could keep the knowledge that I have now.
Yeah. Keep the knowledge. Well, shoot, I don't know. I'd be dumber. I'd take that if I can have my youth again. That's fine with me. If I could be 25 again, I'll give up some of my intellect. But that's, young people need to realize that they have a true gift. It's worth billions of dollars. Like I said, there's billionaires who would give them their fortune if they could exchange their youth. And so we
Mr.
need to learn to appreciate that. There's
Mr.
many
Ziegler
more things
said related to
talk an
that.
hour on that topic.
Well, Mr. Ziegler, when you said about being alive, Mr. Ziegler said you should be appreciative every day that you can wake up. He says if you don't think you should be appreciative for every day that you're alive, just try skipping one.
Yeah. He has a wonderful way of putting things. It's the same principle. I love it. So that's the law of appreciation. We've got the law of what I call self-preservation, and this is about a quick example to illustrate this point is, hey, if you'd be super bummed if you got a speeding ticket, then don't speed. Don't drive like a maniac on the road. Okay, and that's simple and that's easy to understand. But sometimes we take on risk without really knowing it, of things that can really make us unhappy. And so if we avoid, it sounds simple, right? Identify things that can make you unhappy and avoid those things. But it's something you actually have to practice and learn. It's a skill set, really. So you want to avoid any of those pitfalls in life that sometimes can make you spiral out of control. There's the law of the positive mindset. And it goes back to what I was saying. If you're looking for positive things, you're going to find them. If you're looking for negative things, you're going to find them. So let's make a choice there. I'd rather be happy and I'd rather be positive. So I'm going to look for positive things out there than looking for the negative things. And the last one is the law of personal connection. Personal connection means so much for people's resilience and for their mental toughness, for their happiness levels, for their overall joy in their life. So personal connection is very, very important. And I talk about some quick things that people can practice to help with that. For example, I think there's nothing more powerful in this world that you can do than give someone a compliment. Give someone a small compliment. It can change their day, it can change their week, it can change their whole world. A quick example, my wife and I were traveling. We travel a lot, and we're in the airport, and we saw the person at the ticket desk just having the worst day possible. We could see that. I mean, her negative energy was palpable. She's just exuding anger and frustration. And when it was our turn to go up and talk to her, my wife started the conversation saying, "Oh my gosh, I love your scarf." And you could just see the frustration and the anger just drain from their face with just a simple compliment like that. And we don't do enough of that. I think we're out there worried about ourselves and our self-image, that we need to be really out there celebrating people and propping other people up, because you're going to get that back tenfold.
I agree with you so much on that last statement. You know what it reminded me of? You remember Sarah Beth and I were flying out of Oklahoma City several years ago, and big major. This was like in May a few years ago. It's a big major storms coming through Oklahoma at this time, and our flight was delayed. And I was looking on my phone trying to see what's going on, and I saw that I was trying to go from Oklahoma. We were going to fly from Oklahoma to Fort Worth to Raleigh, North Carolina. And I saw there was another flight that was going to go through Charlotte, North Carolina, that would get me home at almost the same time to Raleigh. So I went up to the counter where the person was at. And I could just tell she was frustrated because everybody was screaming at them. Our plane was delayed by several hours because they didn't have enough flight crews. I mean, they had run out of flight crews. Our flight crew was like in Chicago or something. I was like, what are they doing there? They need to be here. So everybody was yelling at her. And I went up and I said, I just want to tell you, I think you're doing a great job today. None of this is your fault, and you are working as hard as you can. The person next to her said, she really needed to hear that today. And I said, listen, we're on that flight. I says, it may not be possible. I just want to check and see if there's any opportunity for us to get on this next one. But if not, I understand. I'm not going to hold you responsible or I just want to be. 10 minutes later, Brian, we were on the flight to Charlotte. She never said a word to me. She just typed it up, and then she handed me the new tickets that says, you guys are on it. And we were home. It was so bad that our flight did not leave for another 16 hours.
Wow.
But we got home immediately. And I think it was just because I wasn't trying to butter her up to get that.
Yeah.
I just could tell she was really stressed out.
Yeah. And people
I was like,
appreciate
I have a
that.
request, but I need to try to give her some value as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. They're going to feel better about themselves, and they're going to be more likely to help other people with whatever they need. And I always try to make an effort in any restaurant, even if the service is just okay. I always tell the server, "You did a great job." And I think people in any job they have need to be recognized for the effort that they put into it. Especially nowadays where it's hard to find good help.
Hmm.
And these people are making an effort to show up to work, and they're frustrated because they're understaffed. And I think they need to hear stuff like that you said to the airline person. They need to hear that more, especially with what we're facing with the labor shortage right now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And last week, Sarah Beth, you did an activity on compliments, and you saw the reaction to that as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. People were shocked. I was like, "No, like, people can give compliments and you'll feel great. You wanna give other people them," and that just people were shocked, like, it was an activity with a group, they had known each other less than a day, and, I mean, they could come up with some compliments for each other, and it just the whole room kinda lit up and, like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks." You know? And I think that's so cool, and I worked in the food service industry for right around 6 years, and those days where just everything was going wrong, I had people yelling at me where it wasn't my fault, and just one person could come through, like, the drive-through line and tell me, "Hey, you're doing a good job, like, thank you," and it changed the whole attitude of the day. But I wanted to jump on so you were talking about how happiness is a feeling, it comes and goes, but fulfillment is that foundation. On the back of I was reading the back of the Bazooka Proof book, it said that it leads to the feeling of joy, or the response of joy. Can you touch on that and how maybe in your life or how you've seen it in other people's lives? So when you understand fulfillment, when you feel that, how it results in joy?
Yeah, sure. So again, think of fulfillment as kind of that baseline. Now, if it's really low, you can if you have go way down, you can stay down there quite a bit. So if something happens to you, and you're going to feel frustrated, depressed, angry. So you come all the way down here, but that foundation, as it comes up, it becomes almost like a trampoline. You kind of just bounce off of it. The more and more that you elevate that fulfillment that you have in your life, and think of it as like all the good things you have. And I kind of call them assets in the book. They're not just physical assets, they're spiritual assets, they're intellectual assets that you have that keep building this up when you follow those five laws. And so your joy is up here. So up high is your joy. And so when you build that foundation up, like I said, it's like a trampoline. And so you can get to that state of joy much more often when that foundation of fulfillment is built up and is super high.
Mm.
Mm. We call that checking your inventory. In one of the workshops we do, doing a personal inventory of what you have. Uh, and when we're working with youth, sometimes they just stare at us. When we first,
Yeah.
I don't have anything, and we have to kind of pull it out of them. And then once you break through that wall of I don't have anything, it just floods out of them, and they just keep writing down as they think of stuff. And
Oh
um,
yeah. And they have more than they know. And so we just need to recognize those things that they do have. Again, their mind is going, physical things. Well, I don't have any money.
mhm.
I don't have a job. I don't have this. And it's like, no, 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 you're thinking about it all wrong. Think about what's inside of you right now. Think about your potential. We talked about youth, just having youth. That's a huge asset. Like I said, it's worth billions of dollars just having your youth.
Mm.
And the potential is priceless. They're just what they are able to contribute into the world is priceless. And so when people start actually inventorying everything that they think about, both intellectually and spiritually, in addition to what are physical assets, it's huge. It's huge.
Well, it's part of the problem with them inventorying, and Sarah Beth has seen this when she's done this workshop, is that they are comparing their inventory versus what they perceive other people's inventory is. Now, I use the word perceived because they don't really know. They just think they know. They're using their comparisons based on what they see on this too often than really what is there. So,
Right. And that's a dangerous place to be, right? They say comparison is the thief of joy.
mhm,
And again, you're comparing your everyday life to someone else's highlight reel, and that's
Mhm.
not fair. When you look on Instagram, in social media, you're seeing people's highlight reel, and most of what's being posted isn't real in the first place. It's just, they're just projecting what they want to be for in a lot of cases, or there's a whole thing about what occurs on social media and how it's far from reality. But yeah, comparison is a thief of joy, and especially on social media, it can be very, very dangerous.
Yeah, you're comparing your worst day versus what someone else has put up as their perceived best day, which is really a production of their best day. Because very rarely do I see someone who's on social media putting up, well, today is my day. I spilt coffee all over me and stuck my toe. And, some will do that, but
and what's funny is that's more relatable to people. And it's funny. Self-deprecation is an art form sometimes, and when you can laugh at yourself, other people really, really appreciate that, because you're making other people feel better about themselves as well, and saying, okay, I can relate to that's happened to me before. And that's great for building relationships too. Because there's a level of trust that comes when you see people putting themselves down, maybe in a funny way, or just saying, man, I had a bad day. Look at this coffee stain on my shirt from going through the drive-through too fast, or something like that. People trust you more when you're more real like that than if you put out, I'm showing my glam, I'm showing my my tux or my suit, or how I may want people to perceive me, and instead of being self-deprecating or just showing the reality of what happens in my daily life.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to say, I have an example. One of my friends, she recently got engaged, and one of my other friends who doesn't know her quite as well was like, "Oh man, like look at that picture. She looks so pretty. Like that's just amazing." And I don't have anything like that going for me. And what she didn't know was, like 10 minutes before that picture was taken, that girl had dropped a blender of like Christmas stuff just all over the floor, got all over her. She had just had to change, and like just it was the worst day ever for her up until that moment. And it's like, I think it's so funny how, like you were saying, we are seeing people's like the highlight. That was the highlight of her day. It wasn't much better like before that. But we look at them, we're like, man, I wish my life was like that. Like, I don't wish I had dropped a blender of stuff on me. But yeah.
Brian, how can our audience get in touch with you and connect with you to learn more about this?
For sure. So the book, you can go to bazookaproof.com is one place if you're looking for the book or want to know more about it. Also, I've got a website called thebeardedphilosopher.com. And so a lot of the articles that I've written that's been published out there in different periodicals related to happiness, related to fulfillment, related to maybe entrepreneurship and business are all out there on thebeardedphilosopher.com. And then if you want to know more about my family, because this is a family business for us, you can go to highlifeactivated.com as well. And you can email us from there. Our social media handles are on those websites as well. And we'd love to hear from everybody.
And for our audience that is listening and not watching, we're going to have all those links in the show notes as well. So if you're looking at it, you can actually look down as well, because you'll see them in the show notes on YouTube. And if you're listening, just go to where the podcast has popped up, and you'll find them notes as well. I'm assuming that thebeardedphilosopher.com has kept you now you're locked in with facial hair for the rest of your life.
In spite of how my wife feels about that, you're right. So yeah, it's she's like, oh, so when I rolled out that website, she's like, oh, does that mean you're keeping the facial hair?
Gotta do it's branding now, honey. I can't change it.
Yeah, I can't help it. It's marketing. It's the rule.
I'll have to, wear a fake one if I have to shave this one. So something is going to be there. So, Brian, thank you for your time with us today. I've enjoyed that. I really appreciate the 5 laws that you share on fulfillment. It really supports and even expands upon a lot of the things that we at Generation Z have been trying to relay to youth over the past decade. And a lot of it is said in a more concise way than I've heard it in quite a while. So I really do appreciate that. So thank you for your time today.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed the conversation here, and I love sharing the years of experience and pondering these things and being able to put them into a book that can be shared with others.
And to our audience, thank you again for listening with us, joining us this week. Someone that you know really needs to hear this message. So like, share, and comment on this, either on YouTube or the Facebook app. Hey, and give us a review as well on those things, because this will help other people hear this message. And we'll see you again next week on the Gen Z Show.